much?
You had to pay out of pocket for...
They'll only do the basic
Okay.
job. This is more comprehensive, but you might want to
Okay.
if
If it's a good lab, that would be
it's
great.
a good lab. The only thing is, I can't get it unless you want to spend, quite a few $100s.
Right. And
My problem is I don't have a thyroid gland anymore. It's been completely removed.
Okay.
And I've gotten along okay for 40 years on Synthroid, but all of a sudden it kind of stopped working.
What did you check?
And so with Sushima's help, I've added Cytomel to that, but it's juggling and trying to get the right amount and finding out why I'm really feeling. I mean, I am 90 years old, so
Wonderful.
part of it could be age, but anyway, that's where I've been.
So what is Cytomel? What is Cytomel? Is that a
Yeah.
natural thyroid? Or?
it's a synthetic. It's a T3. Yeah. It's a
T3.
It's the T3,
okay.
because evidently the T4 is no longer converting to T3, or not enough.
How long does this go to? This is not
to 12.
I've got it.
Or at least till 12.
To
Today
12,
we'll break
okay.
a little early. Yeah.
Oh, it's the 12 now. So
Today. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because it's a bit of an overload. If you go a little bit past that, and I had to go do something as well. So yeah.
You're all by yourself today.
Yeah, he has to work.
Oh.
So, well, then it was till 12. Maybe he could have, because he hasn't worked till 1:45, but it's in the city.
Okay.
We thought it was still 1. So.
Yeah. It's okay. I'll tape it. And then he can watch it later. So for everybody in the room who has had thyroid tests or thyroid troubles, there a little bit of history I think is in order, and I went through that earlier. Were you at the last thyroid?
I heard it.
Yeah. So in the myxedema, thyroidism was discovered really in the 1880s first. So what they found was there were middle-aged women who had, maybe a infection or sudden anxiety or grief, or their husbands had died, or they were rendered penniless, or some huge trauma had happened to them. They were previously a little bit tired, and after the trauma, they started developing symptoms of swelling. They had big swellings under their eyes. They had swellings in their bodies, swellings in their legs, swellings in their heart, and they started to call, and all of them were missing, their thyroid gland had shrunk a lot for various reasons. And so they called it myxedema of thyroidism. So what these guys were doing was clinical work, right? So they were looking at the autopsies of these women. So if they looked at the autopsies of these women at the bags and they sliced through that, they found that the goo was not water. It was something that was not lymphedemic fluid, but it was goo that was like a polysaccharide, like snot is, and it didn't drip out of the sliced flesh. And so they decided to call it mucin as opposed to something else, lymphatic fluid, for instance. And mucin is myxedema, so swelling caused by mucopolysaccharides in your tissue. And they found that this mucopolysaccharide collected in your connective tissue. And the connective tissue is the stuff under your skin, lining of your arteries, outer lining of your arteries, your pericardium, your heart, all your organs, your brain. So a whole bunch of your body is comprised of connective tissue. And when you're hypothyroid and your basal metabolic rate goes down, this connective tissue gets swollen. And so you can't move your fingers because there's mucin here. You can't move your legs because there's mucin in the joints, mucin in your legs. And it's a very different mucin, the different fluid than lymphatic fluid, which happens from venous insufficiency, which is if your heart is not pumping or your kidneys are not functioning right. That's more liquid. So if you slice that, liquids would ooze out of that. And so it's a materially different fluid. So they called it the myxedema at first. Then they called it the myxedema of hypothyroidism. And these women, and there was high fashion those days among some surgeons to just, if you had goiter, they would take out your thyroid. So if you had a swelling and you were hyperplasic, meaning your body was trying to make more thyroid because it probably did not have enough iodine. So everyone knows the goiter belts, right? The goiter belts up in the mountains, the Austrian Alps, the Swiss Alps, the Rockies, the Midwest. These are all goiter belts, which are not near the sea, so there's less iodine, and that causes goiter, which causes these people's thyroids to swell up. And to reduce the swelling, they would just slice off the thyroid instead of giving them iodine.
I've ordered some Lugol's iodine, and it's going to be delivered today.
Yay!
And I'm getting the drops.
Yes.
How many drops do I take?
So you should start with 1 drop in water in the AM hours,
Yes.
and start it very slowly, and then every week double your dosage.
I see.
So we'll go from 1 drop to 2 drops to 4 drops, and at 4 drops go up by 1 extra drop until you feel hyper,
I see.
which you may or may not feel.
I see.
So if you have what'll happen is you're taking a lot of thyroid hormone, but a thyroid hormone is made of an amino acid called tyrosine, right? Which is in eggs, by the way. Raw eggs have a lot of tyrosine, and it has 4 atoms of iodine on it.
I see.
And if your body is saturated with fluorides or bromides or chlorides or other halides, it's gonna displace
It's
them.
going to do what?
It's gonna displace them.
Oh, I see.
Because those are the guys that attach to these iodine receptors. It will displace these, and your thyroid function will improve.
Oh.
If that is the case.
And you'll have detox symptoms because
Yes.
when halides and bromides come, all the halides come out, which is in our water system. We shower in halides, 2 fluoride halides. All the breads have bromide in them. Lemons, cakes. It's really bad. The detox is it can be pretty severe. And they tell you to take vitamin C to help that come out faster. And you also want to take selenium.
Yeah.
Brazil
nuts, which
Yeah.
she's eating.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. And salt. Just
Salt,
plenty
yeah,
of
salt.
salt.
And
Salt will
Salt,
help
yeah, I
ease that. Yeah.
Eat a lot
They
of
do
salt.
something called salt loading in the iodine protocol. There's 2 really good books on it. It's on Facebook. There's 2
there's a
iodine
page,
pages
yeah.
on Facebook. Read those. Just go to their protocol page. And salt loading, if you start to feel really detoxing, because iodine will take the stuff out of you.
Yeah.
It did, and my breasts and all this stuff changed. I used to have all this pain all the time. My breasts totally went away, but it was one of the most difficult protocols I've done. But salt loading, where you take a lot of salt in order to get through the symptoms, so that it pushes all that out of you.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Or vitamin C.
Salt loading is the same as yesterday. We were talking with Margaret.
Yes.
Which is the tube that had a part. And
Yes,
blood.
yes.
Okay. Now, if I take this morning, I had a whole dropper full of blue balls in a glass.
Not a
of
dropper
water.
full. A drop.
I did. I took like 3/4 of a dropper full.
Oh, that's a
Way
lot.
too
That's a
much.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Start with a drop. A drop is about 3 and some milligrams,
Right.
and increase it gradually. If you
Do
take
you
a drop,
put in like a half a cup of water? Or
yeah, half a cup,
What
quarter cup.
happened when you took that?
It's not bad
No,
tasting
I
at
could
all.
already-
Yeah.
I
And
drink a glass
you will
of
find
salt
that
everything in
you
the
get a
morning
bit of a
because I like
buzz
it.
after a bit. You get energy, and what's happening is your thyroid hormone is getting the iodine it needs, or your thyroid gland is getting the iodine it needs, or you don't have a gland, sorry.
Yeah.
But you get the iodine in the event of an iodine
I see.
deficiency.
Okay.
So, yeah,
So which strength of iodine are you using?
2%, I think, is what you
2%,
told me to
yeah,
get.
yeah, it's the 2%. And so it's not just your thyroid that needs iodine. Every single organ in your body, your saliva needs huge amounts of iodine. Your mucous membrane, if you have gut issues, that needs a lot of iodine. And so if you have diarrhea or constipation, the thyroid helps maintain and retain the mucus layer. Your breasts need iodine. Your eyes need iodine. Your kidneys need iodine. And there's a severe shortage of iodine in people today because we take hot tubs in fluoridated water, we have showers, we have brominated tubs, flowers are brominated, your car interior is brominated, this computer is brominated, many parts per million. And the one thing you want to note is all the thyroid tests, the T3, T4, if there's a iodine attached to your thyroid hormone instead of a bromine, or a bromine attached instead of an iodine, the test doesn't make the distinction. So the T3, T4 tests could be normal, but it might be brominated thyroid. It may not be iodinated thyroid. So those are very misleading.
So how do you get the other one?
You can't.
Iodinated?
Yeah, you can't. Those are the tests that test for TSH, T3, T4, and those mess up the analysis because you're feeling hypothyroid and yet your tests are showing normal.
So I should maybe wait to have this blood test until I've been taking the iodine for a week or so?
No, it won't matter
Oh.
because the T3, T4, if they have bromine attached to them or iodine, you're not going to be able to tell. So the results, all the bromine could be replaced by the iodine, and you would have the same normal T3, T4 levels.
Oh.
But in the first instance, you're severely hypothyroid. In the second instance, you're not hypothyroid, if you
Oh.
see what I'm saying. Because you need the iodine for the thyroid to work.
So I could just start taking it and take
Yeah.
this whenever I...
Yeah, start
Yeah,
taking
okay.
it, hope for the best, and use these supplements to enhance thyroid function. And I would say gradually increase your T3 or cytomel in very small doses, and I'll go through the dosage.
Right.
Did you have a question?
No.
Okay. And so there are some people who have no thyroid glands. There are some people who become hypothyroid over the course of their lifetime. There are women who start out hypothyroid because their moms were hypothyroid. So now you are hypothyroid. In your pregnancy, your fetus does not, in the first trimester of pregnancy, your fetus is sucking out your iodine.
So it's genetic.
It's it's genetic in the sense of environment. If you don't have enough iodine, your fetus doesn't have enough iodine. Your fetus is sucking up what little iodine you have, and you are left hypothyroid. So you hear of all these women after pregnancy become bipolar or schizophrenic or put on heaps of weight. That is because they're severely hypothyroid because they were hypothyroid to begin with. They gave up their nutrients to the child, and after pregnancy, their mental and physical health is toast.
Postpartum also.
And the postpartum depression, postpartum depression, weight, obesity, and so on. And it's
So how
it's
do you
as
test?
simple as taking an iodine supplement in your pregnancy.
So how do you test it then? I don't remember from the protocols how they.
Uh,
So I think their testing didn't work either. It was,
the pregnant women are not tested for the entire thyroid panel. If they're low to begin with and it jumps out, an iodine supplementation should be immediately started. But
I mean for orally, like how does she know when she gets to the right spot again?
By symptoms. By
She's just
symptoms,
basing it on her
basal, yeah.
Okay.
Which is why the blood tests are very,
Yeah.
very inaccurate
Yeah.
predictor of thyroid health. It measures the blood. The TSH is measuring how much thyroid secreting pituitary hormone is secreted into your bloodstream. It's not even measuring your thyroid hormone. The T3 and T4 measure how much thyroid from your thyroid gland, presumably, is in your blood, free T3, T4. But your tissues are a totally different matter. Just as you have insulin resistance, remember insulin resistance? Mm-hmm. Where you have lots of insulin, but your blood sugars are not being stored or taken into your body. You can have thyroid resistance where the T4, is not able to compel your cells to take in the T4 and make T3. And so all of those are judged by symptoms. And you look at a person and they have normal TSH, T3, T4, or subnormal, or just below at the bottom of the normal range, but their basal body temperature, which is you get up in the morning, you don't get out of bed, you stick a thermometer, basal temperature thermometer in your armpit, and if your body temperature is less than 97.8, very likely you have hypothyroidism, accompanied by other symptoms. This red things, circles under your red bags under your eyes, called myxedema. The mix accumulates here, so you find people with low thyroid functions develop these leonine jaws, or a hoarse voice, or a constant cough, because you've got this mucin in your lungs, the myxedema in your lungs, or congestive heart failure because you have mucin in your pericardium, or leg swelling where previously they did not have leg swelling. So those are the sort of the symptoms, or very high cholesterol levels. What is the thyroid responsible for? It's responsible for your cholesterol mechanism. So if you see someone's cholesterol levels go from 150 to 400 over a 10-year period, you gotta suspect hypothyroidism. What is the increase in cholesterol treated with? Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
And
So-
it decreases the cholesterol too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it decreases the cholesterol. The cholesterol
Dementia.
is come there in response to the mucin that's generated in the atherosclerotic arteries, and you're attacking the cholesterol with statins. And when you take the statins, you're also gumming up the muscle enzymes, the CoQ10 in particular, and that results in a lot of heart failure, muscle failure, myopathies, the shuffle, the statin shuffle, where people can't walk and they have severe muscle aches and so on. And likewise, in hypothyroidism, you throw your back. You get Charlie horses at night. You get severe cramps in your legs. So this constellation of symptoms is what clinical endocrinologists treat. So there's a difference between there's two types of endocrinologists. One is the medication or the endocrinologists that treat based on blood tests, and then there's the clinical endocrinologists that treat on the basis of blood tests plus your symptoms. And those are the guys you want. You want the clinical endocrinologists, and they exist, but you gotta find them. Hey.
So once you take CoQ10,
If you're on statins, you should definitely take CoQ10. So thyroid gums up. Low thyroid is going to gum up your thyroid, your cholesterol mechanism as well. Of the people who got thyroidectomies in this, so we were on the history of the thyroid, right? So in the 1880s, this guy called William Ord and another fellow write a 200-page paper on what the myxedema. They looked at autopsies, they looked at everything that had happened in the thyroid, and you can actually read that stuff online, which is very, very cool. I sent you some of the lectures, yes.
William Ord.
Huh?
William
Ord.
Ord.
Yeah. William Ord, James, someone or the other. A lot of endocrinology, they were not called endocrinology, they were just physicians at that time, studied and wrote about it. And what they noticed was that without exception, in people with myxedema, their thyroid had kind of dissipated. But these were very advanced cases. So come the 1920s and 30s, they discovered that people whose thyroids were taken out because they had goiters, they started to die at alarming rates. And when they administered pig thyroid, these women, mainly women, survived. And why do women get hypothyroidism more than men? What happens in puberty? Yeah. You develop breasts. You developed your uterus, your reproductive organ, and all of those are iodine hogs. Your breasts take up 10 times more iodine than your thyroid. So women in puberty have a huge, huge additional need of iodine. So if if teenagers feed them iodine-rich foods or even iodine supplementation, because they're drinking brominated soda, they're eating a lot of sugar, they're eating processed foods, and the sugars are going to do what to your insulin levels? Anyone take? Yeah, they're going to raise your insulin levels, and when insulin levels are raised in your blood, your thyroid is suppressed. So it's a double whammy. It's the food that's going to suppress your thyroid through insulin resistance. It is the brominated, fluorinated, chlorinated foods or compounds that are going to suppress the thyroid. And there's a 10 times high need for iodine in puberty, which is why 4-to-1 to 10-to-1 women get more thyroid disease than men. And frequently what happens as the disease advances is the women are saying, "Doctor, I have fibromyalgia, I have this pain, I've got numbness, I have got tingling, I've got severe, I keep throwing my back, or I get cramps, I feel very fatigued and sad," and they're frequently told it's all in their heads because the tests are within range. In the last 50, 60 years, they have reduced the TSH range considerably. It's now down to 1 to 4 as normal. When they started testing, 8 was considered normal. Did you know this? Then the doctors protested. They said, no, at 8, that person is dying, you know. So then they reduced the ranges down to 4, but it's really not much to do with the TSH test at all, your thyroid function. And you got to look at, and one of the problems with prescription pill medication is doctors are not allowed to prescribe based upon your symptoms. You could be looking out of the window and it could be raining hailstorms, but if the machine says that it's a sunny day, the doctor is required to say it's a sunny day, and the hell with the patient's health. And that is where you kind of want to take your health into your own hands, and it's frightening. It's very frightening because thyroid is a hormone. You don't want to mess it up. You don't want to, and then they'll tell you you'll get heart attacks and strokes if you increase your thyroid. And we'll go through the research on why that is simply not the case.
And how is it connected to the adrenals? The adrenal glands
Yes,
are-
the adrenal glands are iodine hogs as well. They love iodine. In the absence of iodine, in the presence of stress, and in the absence of cholesterol in particular, because the adrenal hormones are made from cholesterol. Most hormones are made from cholesterol. So you go on a low-fat, low-cholesterol diet, you can't make your hormones. You can't make your hormones in those glands which need iodine. And if you then are hormone deprived, insulin deprived, or too much insulin because of hormone imbalances, is going to suppress your thyroid.
So, integrated doctors, some of them recommend Premarin.
Yes.
Now, these traditional doctors, I mean, they're also physicians, personal trained, but also homeopathic and alternative both,
Yes.
recommend integrated, conventional don't. They say it's going to cause cancer.
Yes.
But not everyone, anyway, so what do you think about that?
So they recommend what?
Premarin, which is
Premarin.
horsemear urine
Horsemeal
sex
urine,
hormones, yeah.
Sex hormones.
Or sweet potato yam. There's a yam that they extract.
Premarin.
Premarin.
And women who take it have said that they're feeling more moisture in the orifices, they have a better sex life as you get older, that diminishes, and they feel better, but conventional doctors say absolutely not, studies are in, even though studies have proved otherwise. So how do you feel about that?
So there's room for hormone therapy.
Right.
And there's thyroid hormone therapy is probably the most studied hormone therapy. The sex hormones are largely related to cholesterol. So I would say for a woman, before she starts any sex hormone therapy, increase your cholesterol levels. Eat some duck egg yolks. You know, a duck egg yolk has 400 milligrams of cholesterol,
Oh, here, you can sit here.
and frequently you find that a diet that is not based on the U.S. dietary guidelines, which is the food pyramid, alone will alleviate your sex hormone problems.
So do you think Premarin's a problem or not? There's a few things on there.
Depends on when it's administered, how it's administered, and what purpose it's administered for, and if it is administered in lieu of food. So if you have a woman on a low-fat diet, low-fat, low-salt, a very puritanical diet, you can put in hormone therapy, but hormones act in concert
With flat fats.
with all the other hormones. So you can't just add one hormone and expect good results. The hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis requires literally a crescendo, an orchestra of hundreds of hormones to act in concert. And when you add one hormone or two hormones, a lot of imbalance occurs. And a better idea is to start with food. And food works. Food really works. I've seen women who went from these no-fat, low-salt diets onto high-fat diets, reverse their PCOS, reverse uterine fibroids, reverse breast problems and cystic growth in breast and thyroid, and have babies when they were infertile for 8 and 10 years
Direct
before.
antithesis of what conventional medicine
Yes.
says.
Yes.
This is a behemoth of faulty science. We've been
It's
shoved
the-
down
it
our
is.
throats. It's a behemoth. And I was sitting in just quickly in a bunch of doctors the other night at dinner, all conventional specialists in some
Yes,
areas.
yes.
One of them helped build MD Anderson in Houston. Not about me, to share with you the ignorance. When I started talking, little me, not as knowledgeable
You did a
as
pretty good
Patricia,
job of talking.
they looked at me like I was cracked. And only because they knew me so long, and they knew I wasn't, that there was no way I could make any sense. Now, granted, if they now turned the tables and said, this is what chemo and this is what this does, what happens to their lifetime money? What happens to their first-class tickets to God knows where, and their first-class hotels, and their kids and their beautiful multi-million-dollar houses?
Absolutely.
So I said, no, I get that, guys. I totally get it. And the women, totally get it. But that's what's going on. You're scared to look at the truth. And I had all these weren't interested. I was shut down all the way
Of
along.
course, of course.
It was so
Yeah,
sad.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's a deep set of programming. It's no different than what military people are put through to get them to go into these countries and murder people, outright murder
No.
regular people that look just like us. It is deep programming. They take them away from their families, who don't get sleep, you don't get eating. This is a doctor's life.
That's a doctor's life.
Yeah,
They're literally
years.
brainwashed.
Years
Yeah.
of
They
this.
break
36
them down.
hours of work
True,
straight.
very
Yes.
painful brainwashing for years
Yeah.
to become that person with the coat.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard that a high percentage of the thyroid disease in the U.S. is not caused by iodine deficiency, but rather by autoimmune, by Hashimoto's.
Yes. Yes.
So, because I actually did take, as you know, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's back in February, earlier this year, and I had taken iodine, and that is actually kind of pouring fuel on the fire
Yes.
for
So
people with
yes.
Hashimoto's. So before people take iodine,
Yes. Consider everything. So So Hashimoto's was not even on the radar in the 70s. In the late 70s, when in the 80s really, glyphosate came into being, and a lot of environmental toxins came into being, you found more and more cases of Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, which is the body attacks the thyroid. So there's a lot of differences, right? One is we were born without a thyroid. Number two is you were born in an area where there was no iodine, so you developed goiter and they took out your thyroid, so now you don't have a thyroid. The third is where you were born in an area with enough iodine but not too much, so you're now hypothyroid. You have low thyroid metabolism, and you go through life hypothyroid with all the symptoms of hypothyroidism. And the fourth one is the newest one, which is autoimmune hypothyroidism, which is where your body is sensing the thyroid as its enemy and destroying thyroid function. And that is more of a digestive problem and less of a thyroid problem. And so you want to heal and seal your gut before you can heal your thyroid. Because your body's antibodies are assuming the thyroid receptor sites to be antigenic matter, meaning bad stuff, attacking it. And all of a sudden, when you have these attacks or you eat certain foods, gluten, casein, which go through your intestinal walls, all of a sudden you become low thyroid. And then your thyroid goes into gear and says, oh my God, there's not enough thyroid. And you stop eating those foods, and all of a sudden you become hyperthyroid. So you yo-yo between high and low. And if in that one of those phases you saturate your body with iodine, when you're hyper, say, it'll send your heart skittering. It'll make you. However, there is a theory, there's a case that Hashimoto's hypothyroid or hypothyroidism is caused by an inherent lack of iodine in your diet. So your thyroid is not able to withstand the assault of the antibodies. And you do want to look at your thyroid nourishment, but focus on gut health and manage iodine supplementation by symptoms rather than just taking in iodine. So if you feel hyper from iodine, stop. If you don't, if you feel better, it is okay, and even in Hashimoto's, to supplement with iodine. But it's a much trickier thing But the key thing is to remove the environmental toxins, the plastics, the fluorides, the xenoestrogens, all the brominated flours.
So hard.
So hard.
It really is.
So
So you try
Yeah.
in so many ways. It's just
all the
even,
phthalates,
and even the
PCBs.
thing of looking at your own symptoms.
Yeah.
And using your own symptoms, tapping in like that in a real world scenario,
Yeah.
work, partners, pets,
Yes.
disasters in the home, leaky
Very hard.
roof, leaky
Not
whatever.
feeling well in the first place.
Exactly.
It's just
exactly.
too much in the world we live in.
Yes.
Back in the, when we're all in nature and we're just raising our own food and our own animals, you can tap in. But I just don't make the connection when you're talking about like this, because
It's really
telling
hard.
Orly to check her symptoms in order to know when to stop raising her iodine, because I'm confused myself with how, and just reading an article when you were saying that leaky gut is causing Hashimoto. Yesterday, a really long Weston James Price article says, nobody's getting B12 because of the leaky gut. Any
Yes.
tiny amount of distress in the gut, which who doesn't have that
Yes.
in the dietary world we live in, screws completely your B12. You
Yeah.
can't even, your body doesn't even
Can't
use
retain
it
it.
because it can't go through all these
Yeah.
massive processes. Even if you get the right food that has it, which is really hard. Liver, who's eating that every day? Raw milk, who's eating that every day? I mean, these things are just, and it's maddening because you're looking at one symptom you have and you're like,
Yeah.
why? Why does this stuff go away? I'm doing all this wonderful stuff. But anyway, what I really want to say is back to Premarin. Is that the adrenal thing that they're giving you?
That's the horsemear urine
For adrenal fatigue?
for sex hormones. Those are
Oh,
like
okay.
the estrogens,
I was going to
progesterones.
ask you
Yeah.
about the adrenal for
Yeah.
bovine when you were talking about it to somebody else.
So I would, as a first level defense, I would
Yeah.
address it with food and then go on to supplementation and test, and look at the symptoms.
But what are the symptoms of leaky gut?
Leaky gut, psoriasis, acne,
Any type of skin,
diarrhea, constipation, skin conditions,
hair, brittle,
hair, all kinds of. You're not assimilating
dry
stuff,
skin.
and autoimmune conditions, scleroderma, lupus, autoimmune arthritis, heart disease, just about anything. If stuff from the gut is leaking into your bloodstream, it could be amino acids, it could be carbohydrates that are not supposed to be in your gut. If in your hypothyroid, you don't have enough hydrochloric acid in your stomach, so you have proteins that are going into your small intestine, undigested, they go into your body, and your body is launching an attack on these proteins, these peptides, which are not properly digested. And if to the extent they resemble your pancreas, you're going to get type 1 diabetes as a grown-up. There's a huge surge in type 1 diabetes in grown-ups today because of the autoimmunity, your pancreas go out of commission, your kidneys can go out of commission, various organs. And so the acid test is very, very simple. A wonderful bowel movement every single day that is between a 3 and a 4 on the Bristol stool chart. Everybody know what the Bristol stool chart is? And Gloria, you made a very good point, which is when you're in the middle of it and when you're suffering and when you don't have community, you feel
very
helpless
lightweight.
and you
It's
feel
very-
like
it's-
you
it's very
cannot do
frustrating.
anything.
Oh.
And which is why I think Margaret had a brilliant idea, which is you want to ask for help. You want to say, hey, I need help. And get people you love and you trust, get their counsel, create your own war council, and that'll give you the courage to proceed. You're not going to proceed if you're surrounded by standard of care doctors, one treating your ear, one treating your throat, one treating your thyroid, one treating your heart, and so on, because your body is an integrated organism.
May I change one little thing instead of creating a war council? Create a parasympathetic
Yes.
council.
Yes. Good. Yeah, the parasympathetic part is very
Mother
important.
Teresa walked in a
Yes,
peace march,
yes.
wanted to march against
Yes.
war.
Please don't be warlike. This is a parasympathetic. The less adrenal fatigue you have from all this, the better. So don't get mad. Just understand that you need help and community and collect it around yourself. Everybody should have a buddy going to a hospital that asks questions. Why are you hooking me up with this? Why are you giving me a blood transfusion? Because you can get all sorts of infections through blood transfusions. Why is that inline tube necessary? Because you get a lot of staph infections and MRSA in hospitals, and you should avoid going to hospitals.
But take someone
That
that's
kills.
informed.
Yes. Yes. That's a very good point. Take someone that's informed, and it's worth its weight in gold to have this community around you and to create it. But so back to this, we're at the tail end of the old thyroid thing, and that is 91% of the people who are getting their thyroids removed or because they had goiters or because they had cancer turned out to be not cancer. So a lot of people, I think, was it in the 70s or 80s, it was high fashion to remove thyroids, and with the result.
Well, I had a big tumor.
You had a big tumor. Yeah. But the tumors are not malignant in most cases.
Yeah.
What happens is, first, you're hypothyroid because you don't have enough iodine. Your thyroid swells. The stage 2 is it turns they're hard nodules or cysts that are filled with watery stuff. The third stage is when the cysts become hardened, and the final stage is hyperplasic thyroid, where it turns into cancer. And you find that with iodine supplementation, breast cancer rates get substantially reduced because it gets rid of the cysts in your breast, the cysts in your uterus, the cysts in your thyroid. But that's very early in the game.
So you're saying 1 drop a day of Lugol's is sufficient?
You might need a lot more than 1 drop a day, but start there, 1 drop a day. Symptoms of too much iodine are your nose starts running, you get kind of jittery, but not many people get to that point very soon. There's an epidemic.
Two really good Facebook pages that'll help you.
I'm not.
Facebook pages on the iodine.
Is it from Shishima or?
No,
they're
it's
just pages.
2 groups. They require you to read Dr. Brownstein and somebody else's book before you converse on the page, but they'll tell you how to up your dose, and people will answer your questions. I mean, it's hard to do all this.
What's the actual heading to get into it?
I don't remember. I did their protocol.
You can send the links.
Yeah.
She'll send you and stuff.
And the thing is, the selenium's important at the time you're doing
Yes.
the iodine.
Yes.
Selenium and C.
Vitamin C.
Yeah.
Salt loading. Huge.
Yeah.
What's the breakfast name
Book.
again?
Brownstein.
Brown.
Brownstein. There's 2 though. I don't remember the other person.
And in the early periods, eating well is super important. Eat lots of animal fats. Animal fats contain, milk contains a lot. The teats of cows used to be cleaned with iodine before, so people had loads of iodine in their bodies and very little hypothyroidism. Now they don't. They use all sorts of other antiseptic and antibiotic cleansers to clean, and so there's a general shortage of iodine in your body. There's a shortage of selenium. There's a shortage of zinc. So everyone knows what happens. Your blood levels of thyroid go down, and then your brain gets the signal to tell the thyroid, hey, release more thyroid hormone, and that's your thyroid stimulating hormone, which is located up above your palate. And so it secretes TSH, which tells the thyroid to make T4, and the T4 goes, which is the thyroid hormone with 4 atoms of iodine attached to it, which is the inactive form. So remember, the T4 doesn't work. It has to have 1 iodine deiodinized with an enzyme that contains selenium. So selenium is very important in converting the T4 into T3, as is zinc. There's a lot of enzyme activity. So this T4 latches on to cells, and the cells, if they need the thyroid, will strip out an iodine, grab the T3, and the T3 helps in generating cellular energy. So the thyroid hormone is responsible for your heart rate, your basal metabolic rate, your cholesterol mechanism, a huge portion of your fertility, your activity, your fatigue levels, and so on. And so it's super, super important that you think about these things as a whole. Consider your diet. Women used to eat a lot more fats than they do now. Eat more fats and avoid thyroid disease. Yep.
When you said that for the TSH thing, at the roof of the mouth, in many meditations I've done, you always keep your tip of your tongue up there behind your front teeth.
Yeah,
Do they talk about what?
There's probably something there.
Yeah.
And the yogasanas, the upside down sarangasana, you're massaging your thyroid. So any kind of blood flow to the thyroid, to the pituitary, is a good thing. So in the early going, they used to. So then they said they took away the goiters and they took away the thyroid. And all these women started dying because they said, "Gee, thyroid must be an essential organ since they're all dying." And someone said, "Let's administer pig thyroid." So they administered pig thyroid, and lo and behold, the women were no more dying. So that's when desiccated thyroid hormone came into being. And from the late 1800s all the way to 1970s, this Armour and other desiccated bovine or porcine thyroid hormones were administered.
It's super expensive.
Are they? Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm a thyroidist.
Oh,
Not
okay.
the others. Not the synthroid and pig.
Oh yeah, those are all synthetic. In the early going, they came up with a synthetic thyroid hormone, and they thought they'd hit the jackpot, and it was the dexthyroxine, which is, levo is the left-hand side, and dexa is the right-hand side facing thyroid hormone. And they found that it was 1/20th of the effectiveness of the levothyroxine. So a lot of women got experimented on with the dexa, but it didn't work.
So the difference in the medications had to do with which side of the brain they affect?
No, where the iodine is located in the construction of the thyroid hormone, the synthetic thyroid hormone.
It's like a mirror image of the chemical.
It's like a right-hand glove, doesn't fit
Okay.
into the left-hand side. And so this hormone was not binding to the thyroid receptors in the body.
Okay.
And so they would increase the dose. They were giving like 600-800 micrograms equivalent, and it wasn't working. So then they moved to, they said, let's try this levothyroxine. But they gave it at the same dosage as the Dexo. So a lot of women died from that because now you had increased the dose 20 times. So there's a lot of experimentation that went on at a great cost to people's health. Whereas if people had been supplemented with iodine at the outset, a lot of these problems would not have occurred. So we went from the Dexa to the levothyroxine. The levothyroxine is the T4. And the T4 is the inactive form of the hormone. Whereas the ground up pig hormone is 4, 3, 2, 1, and calcitonin. And your thyroid and your body needs all of those in various steps and measures. And so therefore, levo was administered because it was synthetic and the dose could be precise, but it didn't always work, and the side effects were high with the levothyroxine. So there was this great big debate between the desiccated thyroid hormone people and the synthetic thyroid hormone people, and it rages on today.
You spend more for the compound.
Say what?
You spend more money.
Is that
for the
right? So
compound.
that it's
Synthetic-
cheaper. Of course, it's cheaper, and so
Yeah.
Medicare and Medi-Cal and the insurance companies cover the cheaper hormone. On the other hand, if you have Hashis and your body is allergic to thyroid, your own thyroid, guess what eating pig thyroid will do? It'll make you worse. And so for diseases like Hashimoto's, autoimmune hypothyroidism, and thyroiditis, you may want to consider two hormones.
Yeah, I
the
just
T4,
went on
T3.
a compounded hormone from Kosh Pharmacy in San Francisco, and it's expensive. It was
Very.
like almost $40 for 30 pills.
Good
They
Lord.
celebrate when you walk in because it's all compounded.
Yeah.
You
Does
said
it work
once.
better than your previous?
I've been on it now for a week and a day,
Mhm.
and I'm also taking LDN,
Okay.
and he prescribed a ashwagandha
Mm-hmm.
powder
Herbal, yeah.
that I love,
Mm-hmm.
and I am feeling better
You're feeling
May
better.
I ask,
between those three things.
Is it an integrated doctor you're going to?
Yes, a functional doctor, Dr. Cowan. I went to Dr. Cowan. I wanted to go to his talk last night. I couldn't go. I know.
Where
Was
was
it
he
good?
talking?
He was talking at a facility, a pediatric doctor office in Mill Valley last night. She got the WAPF email, but it was good. Karen, Did a lot of people show up? Yeah, good.
Is it a doctor?
You know, I went to him once, and he really helped me. That's all I know. Sunshine's go back to him. He really helped her. And you know, one of the things he said something interesting. He said that Western medicine treats when you go in with Hashis, they treat the thyroid. But if you had rheumatoid arthritis and you had pain in your knees, they wouldn't treat your knees. They
treat your body.
They would be treating your underlying autoimmune disease. So why in Hashis are they treating exclusively your thyroid? And what he does is he actually referred me to the pharmacist of Koshland because he does so much work in that area that
He's an
he
expert.
looks at your
Yeah.
tests. He looks at your tests and actually does the combo between the T4 and the T3. So, but the interesting thing also is that in addition to the compound, he gave me a generic bovine thyroid, and I brought them for people to see if they want to see them.
Yes, please.
And because he wants that bovine thyroid will be a decoy, and he said hopefully instead of your
It'll attack the bovine.
instead of your immune system attacking your thyroid, hopefully it will attack the bovine thyroid. So basically, this is the generic thyroid.
T3, T4, compounded.
No, that's not the compound. This is the LDN,
Okay.
1 point low dose natural.
That's the
hormone.
glandular.
Yeah,
Glandular.
and this is the T4 T3 compound right here.
This is the naltrexone. Yeah. And that is the
And this is the ashwagandha powder.
T3, T4.
Love this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, what is that?
And this actually, I went to their website and they have a lot of powders because I stopped drinking coffee, so I don't drink coffee or tea.
Awesome.
And this is really great. They have a lot of different powders.
Yes, yes. So, Dr. Cowan, anyone want to go? Can we discuss costs a little bit? Because going to a private integrative doctor is
It was
expensive.
$375.
Okay.
He's way out in the middle of Noe Valley, so it's kind of like hard to get there.
Parking is difficult, yeah, but not
$375.
impossible.
Yeah.
No, the parking is fine.
Yeah.
And you can go to Rainbow on the way home.
That's what I do.
Get yourself,
Visit my
yes.
son.
And visit your son. That's so
There you
nice. The medication is expensive, so to commit to a compounded therapy, you are going to be spending $100 a month?
Yeah.
Maybe not quite that much.
It's what it is.
It'll be more like maybe $70 to $80 a month.
And he does his own blood tests?
No, the pharmacist.
Yeah.
No.
No, not that. But
No.
Dr. Cowan, did
Dr.
they do
Cowan.
the Boston Heart?
No, they do not do the tests. He gives a prescription for the test, and I can go to Quest
And get it done.
Diagnostics
Yes.
and get the test, and it's $105 for the thyroid panel.
Entire panel?
Just for the thyroid and vitamin D is $105.
Okay.
The complete?
I don't know if
No.
they're a spanner in the works.
The
The
complete
Quest
thyroid
is questionable.
I believe it's a complete thyroid
You know that?
panel. Yeah.
Quest is questionable. This is why I don't throw another spanner in the works. So
Yeah.
everything we look at is an issue. But Quest is questionable.
Yeah. Now, when you say that, what do you mean they're questionable? What
They're
does that
not as good as the ones over. Is it Utah? The
Doctor's lab?
Okay.
the labs over there. where
Oh,
you
there are
have the
tons
blood
of
work
labs
done.
that'll do.
Yeah,
So you
there's
can go
a
to
lot of
anyone.
Black cord.
Yeah.
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 There's
Yeah.
all sorts of.
Now, what can go wrong with Quest? Is it because they're
Too generic. They don't go
Okay.
into. Is that right? To get some.
Depends on the
false
test you
positives.
order. You can
Yeah.
order very detailed tests with all
Okay.
of these labs,
Yeah.
and labs are going to have a difference in
Yeah.
results.
and my full blood panel
Yeah.
was $250 some odd dollars.
Yeah.
The thing is, like I have Medicare, and he'll say to me, "Well, okay, get your Medicare doctor to prescribe it, because then Medicare will cover that."
Once a year they do
Right.
it. Only once a year Medicare.
No, it depends what the tests are for.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And so there are things you can, if you're on Medicare, there are things that you can somehow shift over to the Medicare expense. Now with Cowan, I don't know what the $375. He has a plan that you can pay less for a first visit, but then you pay $50 a month. call him anytime, email him.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
That's
you can
amazing.
get consults constantly. A 15-minute consult over the phone. You just have to schedule it.
Yeah.
You can email him. You don't have to schedule that.
Yeah.
And if you want a 15-minute consult in his office, so you don't have to drive that circuitous way from her in.
Yeah.
You can do that. And they don't say, well, you already had one this one. No, you can do
That's great.
as you need.
Exactly.
And it's very good.
And if you are looking for you had a question? Uh-huh. Yes, that is T4.
That's me.
That's levothyroxine. Yes. Are you not still taking it? Why? Okay. Generally, if you're hypothyroid, you're hypothyroid. And you know, lack of thyroid hormone can lead to a lot of other diseases if the thyroid is not properly functioning. So maybe you want to get it tested and see if you need to be on a thyroid hormone.
So I actually have the prescription from him because I haven't done the test yet, the lab test, which would say all the ones he prescribes to check the thyroid. You would know them better than I.
You know, he wanted one of the things he wanted to be sure to see on the next thyroid test was reverse T3.
So
Do you have reverse T3 on there? That's the one thing you do need to add.
So what
Yes,
does he have on there?
He has all of them. He
Or
has
do you want to read it so people
Oh yes, so the tests you want are these 5 tests. 1, 2, TSH, T4, that is free T4, free T3, reverse T3. And TPO, I would recommend TPO and thyroglobulin antibodies if you are initially diagnosing.
And that's the antibody for the
And then does
Hashimoto's.
he have a metabolic something on there?
Antibodies. Oh yeah, he does say. And HbA1c and COMB, and CRP. Highly sensitive CRP. That's hard stuff. That's awesome.
Reverse T3.
Reverse T3. CRP is very good for you, and hemoglobin A1c you already have, so you don't need it. So CRP, highly sensitive CRP, is a very good thing for you as well.
So also, if you want to hear some of the things he has to say, he's on YouTube. A lot of his talks and interviews are on YouTube.
And he also has a newsletter for
That's
for
from me.
Dr. Cowan's Garden.
Really?
He has a newsletter for
The
Dr.
fourfold
Yes.
path to
Yes.
healing.
Yeah.
He's got a newsletter.
Yeah.
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 How do you connect to him?
You just look him up on the internet.
Okay.
He's available, and you know the nice thing about Dr. Cowan right now is that he's accepting new patients. You don't have to wait a week a month or longer to get in to see him.
See, some of the he's an integrated doctor. So
He's a holistic doctor.
is he also medical trained?
Yes, he's a medical MD.
He's
doctor.
medically trained, and he also followed a lot of Rudolf Steiner. So does
Wonderful.
yeah.
What does he call that? No.
Anthroposophical.
Anthroposophical medicine.
Anthroposophical medicine.
And if you want any of his information, I have it on the prescription. Has his address and phone number and everything.
Thank you.
Anthroposophical.
The integrated doctors that I know and went to, and I don't anymore, became so avaricious financially.
Yes.
And the IVs, people just hooked up right, left, and center, $700, $800 a whack, and they were just salivating. I mean, they were buying homes all over the place. And I said, you know, if you really want to help, that's fine. Making money's fine. But when you're doing it, then some of these people were losing their lives, dying. Some of these people were just every day wanting to maintain a life, and they didn't give a shit.
Yeah, there's
And
a
at
lot
that
of that
point, I
going on.
walked away. I said, I can't do this financially, and otherwise, I don't make it.
With allopathic as well as integrative doctors, you have to be very discriminating.
Yeah.
Now,
It
one of the
became the same as allopathic because of the debt. It's all about
It's all about the student
It's all about the debt in this country. I mean,
it's a very scary thing.
and
when
that's
you
why they
are
charge
able
like
to-
that, and they become, they start out wanting to do something good, just like some politicians might.
Yeah,
And
and they
end
get
up-
brainwashed.
end up very
And it's also
Now,
a
Sushma,
malpractice.
I did want to mention
That too. Yeah,
that I do have myxedema,
Yes. Yes. you do.
and I have those in my knees, and I kind of feel it in my joints. Will that go away?
With the proper, adequate thyroid medication.
Yeah.
it will.
Okay. Great.
But not without. If it's
That freaks me
under
out.
medicating, the myxedema is going to stay.
Well, again, I'm at the beginning of this
Yes.
protocol, and he wanted to test me after 4 weeks, which I think is a little short,
Yes.
and I'm going to confirm that with him.
Yes. And I'm going to send Dr. Cowan a whole bunch of papers. The testing is not representative of thyroid function, and there's a huge body of evidence, and there's a whole bunch of literature on it that every integrative doctor really should learn, should read at least, and not apply the standard of care based on the tests. Okay, so myxedema. Everyone, so this is your classic case of myxedema. You see that long face? The long face becomes a sideways face. So you develop a little bit of bulging here, the tops of the eyes, under the eyes, over here, the mucin collects here, and a couple of kids later, or some life grief or trauma later, or with insulin resistance as well, your thyroid gets suppressed, and lo and behold, this fluid, kind of boggy fluid, collects in all your body. And that's an old picture of myxedema, I think from Dr. Ward's papers. What is myxedema coma? Extreme expression of hypothyroidism. That does not mean you don't have myxedema. There's levels of myxedema, and myxedema coma is just the final stage when you die. If you are admitted to emergency, there's a 50% mortality rate, and they will administer massive amounts of thyroid hormone, but it really doesn't work in the last stages because you got this mucopolysaccharides in all your connective tissues, and it may be too late because the organs come to a grinding halt. Your kidneys stop functioning, your heart stops functioning, your pericardium swells up, your brain swells up, and that is myxedema coma. So the early recognition is very critical. So if you find that you're eating what you used to eat, you're sleeping the way you used to sleep, but all of a sudden you're kind of puffy, you're padding on the pounds for no rhyme or reason, consider your thyroid. Consider your thyroid and do things that if you have fatigue, if you're diagnosed with fibromyalgia, if you're diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, if you're diagnosed with lupus. You see a lot of women with that classic butterfly rash. Someone was telling me it's a Scottish rose. No, it's not the Scottish rose. It's myxedema of hypothyroidism. And if you have that, that's connective tissue underneath your skin is inflamed. And so lupus is diagnosed as yet another autoimmune condition, but it's not. It's really related primarily to hypothyroidism. So what happened in the 70s was Synthroid was developed, this gold standard test was developed, and doctors were counseled to treat patients on the basis of these tests, but they never tested the tests against actual symptoms of hypothyroidism. The TSH test was never tested against symptoms of hypothyroidism, which is your tendon reflexes, your basal metabolic rate, and all that. And so, based on these tests, if you did not qualify for hypothyroidism, your medication was taken away. So these women who were on ground up pig thyroid of 2 and 4 and 6 grains, all of a sudden had their medications cut in half and a quarter. And what started after that? An epidemic of fibromyalgia, lupus, later stages heart disease, and cancer. And so lupus went through the roof. Chronic fatigue syndrome went through the roof in about the 70s. Fibromyalgia went through the roof. And these women had technically nothing wrong with them and were written off as psychotics. Or they would complain, I had numbing and tingling in my fingers or legs or multiple sclerosis, a prototypical final symptom of hypothyroidism. And so all of a sudden you had 1 in 4 men, but 6 in 10 women suffering hypothyroidism. Their medication gets taken away, and you have a new set of diseases that crop up. And for fibromyalgia, we're medicating with mental drugs, psychotropics, and antidepressants, and muscle-type drugs, or steroids, and so on. And the women are bedridden. They can't think. They have mental fog. And so that became a very big problem. And those women from the 70s are today in their 80s and 90s and suffering terribly.
So in deference to physicians,
Yes.
is it that they know this, they're never taught this, or they know this because they're taught to couple and poison, whatever, and administer pharmaceuticals, and they know about it, but they know they won't make money in it? So what's it, is it both? How could they
it's a
not know
combination.
this? How could
In the
they-
70s, there were a lot of clinical endocrinologists who noticed this, who protested this. Their cries were overrun by pharmaceuticals that wanted a synthetic drug, which called for
That people
a
have
bunch
to
of
take every
tests.
day?
Yeah,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that was precise, which called for a bunch of tests. So I don't think it started with any malintent. It was a series of blunders, and then people started making money at this stuff. I mean, you make money from
Well, if
fibromyalgia.
you get into an organization like Kaiser,
Yeah.
you know, they're doing evidence-based medicine. They have a very specific protocol. They're not going to look outside the box.
Exactly.
But they're not any different than any other allopathic doctor.
Oh, God, no.
And it's really an interesting phenomenon, frankly.
Yes.
It's hard to really understand what the justification is behind these medical institutions having their head
It's
firmly planted
It's a bottom
Stuck
line.
in the
in
sand.
ground.
Yeah.
It's a bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's
it took us 50 years to say cigarettes smoking causes cancer. 50, 60, maybe 70 years before people all agreed. In the meantime, doctors are advocating pregnant women have a smoke a day. They were smoking themselves. They thought it was good for coughs and colds. So all of
They
this.
did it with
Yeah.
cigarettes.
Yeah.
One of the things I was looking at some film archive documentary, and this guy said this is all the commercials from the 40s and the 50s
Yes.
that they saved. And in these commercials, he said, are cigarette commercials touting cigarettes as a health food,
Yes.
as a health
They were sailing
protocol.
on the yacht and they were riding their horses.
Yeah.
They're always handsome and beautiful. So if I have a cigarette, that'll be me.
Yeah.
Well, they used to say light up so that you can relax.
Yes. Yes. Light up.
Well, nicotine, the plant used to be used very differently.
Very
So if
different.
you're looking
It's
at
a very
herbs and
therapeutic
plants,
plant. Yes.
Well, I think that
there are people
nicotine
who make
actually,
poultices and
Yeah.
use it on serious
Exactly.
injuries, like
Yes.
car accident injuries and things.
I think
And
that
it does-
nicotine does
it
have
does.
And they just
health
work.
They were.
Not
These are
Yeah.
very smart people, these doctors. I don't think that
Convoluted.
they're,
Yeah.
people have used this division for vaccines and all this illness and sickness in our world to make doctors these horrible people. I don't think that they are. They're not just sitting around going, let's see how much money I can make. They are dropped into a system, they're given all this debt.
Yes.
You don't walk away from it and then go, okay, now I don't have
Sure.
anywhere to live, I don't have any food to eat myself. I mean,
And-
it's a whole...
Or the American Medical Association is after my license.
Exactly.
do.
Well,
because
that's
I'm
what I
telling
was just
people
going to
the
say.
truth,
If
I'm
you
not
don't
allowed to.
follow,
Yeah.
if you don't follow
That's
their
your goal.
protocols,
That's
You'll
your
get in trouble,
goal.
you
yeah.
get dumped.
Yes.
Dr. Suzanne Humphreys talked about in front of Congress with
Yes.
vaccines.
Yeah.
Got
Poor
them.
down,
Yes.
and she's gone.
She's gone.
Right? And they
Is
just
she
go.
dead gone? Like a lot
No,
of
no,
them?
she's
She's
alive.
in New Zealand.
But she's
Because
no
a lot
longer
of them are
practicing.
being killed.
She's not. I did it to you.
Well, she didn't get killed. Yes. Yes.
Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, cancer. He was murdered.
Yeah.
His wife married just as he was murdered, my husband.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
There you
It's-
go.
Dr. Hal Huggins, the Mercury guy, his whole life was taken apart. You know?
Yep.
Raymond Wright, Nicholas Tesla, so good.
So you never, I mean, those are the fear ones they put in place so that you don't step outside the box because this is going to happen to you.
But there's good news here, and that is there's a fix for all this. It's very simple. It's very simple. So if you have constipated fecal impaction, inflammatory bowels, megacolon, this is where you get your colon expands in size because you got connective tissue, severe constipation. Every woman in this world should be able to poop a good solid poop on the strength of her own two legs. If you're not, you very likely have hypothyroidism. Megacolon is something that was treated by, so these women would get hypothyroid in the 70s and 80s, and their colons would become hyperplasic, right? So big fat colons. And I know people who had their colons resected. They took out 18 inches of their colon because they said you have a very large colon and now you'll poop better. Well, guess what? It didn't help, and they just lost a very critical organ. So all kinds of just atrocious things have been happening in the name of curing what is underlying a very basic condition of hypothyroidism.
Is this in your PowerPoint?
Yes, so
It's
gallbladder.
all of this.
Yeah, so you get gallbladder issues, liver congestion. Why? Because the thyroid is critical to liver health, to cholesterol health. The liver secretes bile. The bile becomes precipitated or turns into stone. Women with hypothyroidism have gallbladder problems. And when they have gallbladder problems, guess what we do?
Remove it.
Yes, yes. If they have thyroid problems, we remove the thyroid. If they have gallbladder problems, we remove the gallbladder. If they have colon problems, we remove the colon. Irritable bladder, which is you pee a lot. The outside of your bladder gets congested with mucin, and it doesn't, the peristalsis ceases. So your entire alimentary canal is not working in good order. You don't assimilate. You don't make hydrochloric acid, so you can't make proteins. If you can't make proteins, they go undigested, and you can develop hypothyroidism, that is Hashimoto's-like, which is autoimmune. You eat glyphosate, your membranes in your alimentary canal are now permeable because every grain and crop in the U.S. is laden with glyphosate. And so now you're developing autoimmune thyroid, bipolar, schizophrenia. These are all inflammatory diseases that are related to mucin in various parts of your body. Myxedema, weight gain, increasing belly, ascites in your belly, very high cholesterol levels from low to high without change in diet, bradycardia, low heartbeat, low blood pressure, dizziness, tinnitus, pulmonary, TB used to be. A lot of these, what the king or the god of thyroid research was a fellow by the name of Broda Barnes, who devoted his life to thyroid research. He was born in 1905, I think, and practiced all the way into the 1980s. But what he discovered was, in the old days, before antibiotics, a lot of people with low thyroid function would have low immune system, and they would die of infection before the third decade of their life. So these were the people who died from tuberculosis, lung tuberculosis in particular. And with antibiotics, with the advent of antibiotics, all of a sudden the hypothyroid population surged because these people were living now. They were hypothyroid. They couldn't get TB because we have antibiotic treatment for TB, and they started getting all these esoteric diseases instead, which resulted in heart disease, cardiac failure, cancer, etc. So it's a continuum. It's a continuum. And what Broda Barnes discovered, you know how they said during the war, heart disease declined. Remember in Europe, there are all these studies where they said, in the Second World War, there were people who were eating less fats and meats, and so therefore, heart disease declined.
Do you know where that came from? Did you see Frogs Over Knives?
I didn't see it, but I read the Ansel Keys study, yes.
Hitler went through Norway and
And
killed, and so we
Finland,
don't want to bother killing all the people, just take your animals. We need them for food anyway. For our soldiers, they're going to die naturally. They were converted to eating plant-based diet. They thrived. All their diseases left them. And there were two doctors, one from an Ivy League school, both farmers who did the same study. It's a wonderful documentary, and one of them was just cut off. And Forks Over Knives, it's amazing. They came to the same conclusion.
But their conclusions were incorrect, actually.
No, what do you mean?
Because
the pyramid was inverse because the lobbyists.
The pyramid espouses
brought us
plant-based foods and
Yes.
no animal-based foods.
Right.
Their thinking was they ate lots of plant-based foods, did not eat animal-based foods, and that's why heart disease got reversed.
Right.
But the reality is, when Broda Barnes looked at autopsies of the actual deaths, what he discovered was that it was not that there was less heart disease, it was that there were more deaths from infection.
Right.
So people died, people who would have died from heart disease had there been antibiotics, were dying from infection. And when antibiotics came into being, infectious disease ceased and heart disease went through the... So the conclusion in Forks and Knives was just completely wrong. And what they said was, because these people are not eating fats, therefore there was no heart disease because cholesterol causes heart disease.
Right.
But he actually looked at the dead people in Austria, and we'll go through that. But so the problem here is, as a result of that study, actually, we've gone to a low-fat, low-salt women in particular, diet for the last 50, 60, 70 years. And the absence of fats, the absence of cholesterol has done a number on our hormones, fertility, and so on. And it's caused something called insulin resistance, which is all of these foods are basically carbohydrate foods. And carbohydrate foods, regardless of what they are, turn into sugar in your bloodstream. That causes a surge of insulin, and the insulin surge suppresses your thyroid. So we have, us women have lived under a misapprehension for nearly 50 years and lost our health, lost fertility. Women today have to spend $10,000 on in vitro. They could eat dairy fats and get pregnant in a jiffy. And so
My son, I just came back from Australia, and my son went to a school reunion at the grammar school he went to, and he said, "Mom, the men in my 30s can't have children."
yes, the men are
Wow.
infertile too.
And they're using IVF. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Interesting.
So all of these, so low heartbeat, sometimes it goes from brady to tachy, depending on what kind of thyroid problem you have. You get hyper, very low BP to very high BP. What happens when you, in a hypothyroid state, go from very low to very high? Anyone guess which organ gets involved? You have very low BP, and all of a sudden, it goes through the roof, your blood pressure.
What organ?
Yes. Your heart gets affected, but what's happening is your adrenals then come into play.
Oh.
When your body reaches a crisis point, say your heartbeat goes down to 30, 35, your blood pressure drops, all of a sudden your emergency hormones take over, which is your adrenals, and they cause your heart to hammer and blood pressure to go up. So you see this weird condition of low and then high blood pressure towards the very end of hypothyroid states. Migraines with auras, very typical of people with hypo. Fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis, paralysis of the limbs, constant infections, especially lung infections, chronic coughs. If you don't stop coughing for a long time, consider hypo. Neck. Tuberculosis got cured, but now we have a new version of TB called MAC, which is avian complex tuberculosis, which is not infectious, but it can be treated with antibiotics. And
Avian like in birds?
Mycobacterium avium, like bird tuberculosis, in your lungs, and it stays there at a low level for years and years, and these people survive, but with very low quality of life. And antibiotics frequently will not cure it.
So under migraine, what does that mean? Migraines with auras?
Auras meaning you see, you don't see, you see patchy, you see colors, psychedelic colors.
So is that like what they call ocular migraine?
Yes,
Okay.
ocular migraine. And that's because your brain gets inflamed. And you'll find that upon taking appropriate hypo medications, the migraines actually go away. And mostly people, nosebleeds. Nosebleeds are very common because you bruise more easily. Your arteries and your veins are very fragile. They've got mucin around them. So if you have nosebleeds, fibro, chronic fatigue, you wanted to say something?
Pardon?
Did you wanted to say something?
No.
Oh, okay. Infertility, epidemic, PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, excessive bleeding, menstrual problems, fibroids, uterine hyperplasia, your uterus bloats, heart, liver, critical organ hyperplasia. And for the next 40 minutes, we'll talk only about the heart because we have talked about everything else. Swollen skin, particularly look at your skin. You should be able to pinch your skin and get this kind of a pinch. If there's a big, 1 or 2 inch thing in your skin, leg, thigh skin, or in your belly skin, consider that you could be myxedemic. And if you're myxedemic, thyroid medication will help. Sleep apnea, because your lungs get filled up with fluid, and a low basal metabolic rate with body temps of under 97.8. So does everybody have a basal body temperature thermometer?
I've been meaning to get one.
Oh, it's like
I might
$10
have.
$10.
I got
Just
one
get
and
it.
it didn't work, I swear.
Oh, put it in your armpit in the morning for 15 minutes or 5 minutes before you wake up. and it'll measure your basal
So
temperature.
you're talking about the thermometer that has the mercury in it?
No, the
No.
non-mercury. Would you tell them about that?
I have one with mercury, but I put it under
Put
my
it in your
arm.
arm.
And you
Yeah.
said that.
You say getting on mercury? Is that what you're
That-
Avoid
no, I have a couple old mercury ones that I
Yeah.
put.
There's an alcohol-based one.
But what I'm saying, but does a rectal one work as well as?
No, the rectal temperatures are going to be higher.
No, I mean, can you use a rectal thermometer under the arm and get this?
Oh, yeah. You're just measuring temperatures. The problem with using it in your mouth is people with hypothyroidism frequently have infections. They have sinusitis, they have pulmonary infections, and so this is going to be higher if they're inflamed. This actually measures your metabolic rate better.
Did you say get a non-mercury thermometer?
As mercury goes through glass into your body. Avoid it, but if you got what you got, you got what you got.
97.2 was
Yeah, under 97.8 is hypo, generally speaking.
And my temperature regularly clocks in at 97.6.
Okay, with the medication, or without?
No, just historically.
Oh, historically, okay, but recently was less, more.
I haven't taken my temperature recently. I have to get a thermometer.
Okay, so we're gonna go. We did all this, so let's just go step over to heart because the heart is so important. Thyroid and the heart. Okay, so heart disease was non-existent at the turn of the century, last century. In the 1920s is when the first myocardial infarction occurred. Before that, it was unheard of. Anyone guess why?
wasn't diagnosed.
Huh?
Maybe it wasn't diagnosed.
It was diagnosable.
Genetic manipulation of human beings.
Antibiotics.
I'm going with that one for every day.
In part.
So heart disease was non-existent
Yeah.
when?
In the 1920s.
Or they didn't
The
know
first
about it?
myocardial,
Or they didn't know
they knew about it, but there were no infarcts. The first myocardial infarction was diagnosed, I think, 1921 to 30, and there's a lot of reasons that are espoused for that, but one of the chief ones was
Medical practices.
medical practices, and when antibiotics came into being, you were not dying from infection. People were dying from heart disease and cancer. So today, more than 600,000, maybe it's 700 plus, annually die from cancer. There's nearly no people died from cancer in the 1920s.
Heart disease.
Oh, excuse me, heart disease, cancer too, actually.
And the first one happened because of antibiotics, you're saying?
Well, the first one happened because of a number of causes. We changed the composition of our fats first. We went from saturated fats to unnatural polyunsaturated fats, which are very, very heart toxic. We pretty much became hypothyroid because of exogenous toxins. The mercury, the plastics, the DDT, the this, the that.
You know, I think
and
the
then
20s was also a time when fast foods like cereals really took
started,
off.
yeah.
Crisco
got invented in 19.
Yeah.
Didn't the hamburger recently, they opened up after a few 30 years and it was still perfect? Was it McDonald's?
Yeah, McDonald's, yeah.
And oleomargarine that was
Oh, yeah.
white and that you used a little tilt to make it
Yeah.
yellow.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Oh,
And it was cheap. It was a fraction of the cost of real butter.
yeah, or Crisco.
Yeah. And so it kind of took off. We started eating more carbohydrates. We stopped eating saturated fats. We started eating Crisco. Antibiotics got invented. There was insulin resistance because we ate too many carbs, and we shunned eggs, and we shunned meats, and we shunned cholesterol in particular. So Rhoda Barnes was an endocrinologist who would go every summer to a place called Graz in Austria. It is a very interesting story. He is one of the preeminent endocrinologists of our time, and a lot of this research would not have been known to us without him. He was a PhD in endocrinology, then he got an MD. He did about 8-10 years of research, and then his entire life was devoted to treating thyroid conditions.
What was his name?
Rhoda Barnes.
Oh, yeah.
And you should find and read every book you can about him, by him. So he said, I want to know why people really died, how heart disease killed. So he went to Graz in Austria. Austria is part of the goiter belt, a lot of goiter because it's a mountainous area, so no iodine. And Empress Maria Theresa, excuse me, not Elizabeth, Empress Maria Theresa had decreed 200 years ago that anyone who came to the hospital or died in the hospital, an autopsy was mandatory. So he had rich information. He looked at 70,000 autopsies over a 15-year period and looked at the cause of deaths. And he was the one who actually looked at the clinical data that contravenes all the modern theories of heart disease, which is there was half to two-thirds of the deaths during that period, the war periods, were happening from tuberculosis and other infections. And when antibiotics, which were discovered or invented during the Second World War, tuberculosis dropped like a rock. Instead, heart disease started causing the largest number of deaths. So the war deaths were from infections and post-war deaths were from heart disease.
So suddenly, in looking at this, it made me reflect on the whole thing that I'm so excited about is the parasympathetic. Because they say that heart attacks usually happen when the parasympathetic is too low. And the sympathetic. Well, 1920s, I mean, the war.
Yes, we're very
Can you
stressful.
imagine what people were feeling? I mean, the sympathetic must have gone through the
Well,
roof.
plus the Spanish flu had just wiped out a lot of people and towns. Phoenix had apparently gone under, mob rule back in the Spanish flu. That was a terrible epidemic. People were dropping like flies.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how much of that is talked about in all of this. as
Not at all,
causes.
but so probably very one of the most important things.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
What
So-
about something like the hurricane that we've just had? Talk about trauma and
Yes,
Geoengineered
yes,
one.
yes.
For sure.
you know.
Imagine
Boy,
that.
is that awful?
Or the fires. Yeah.
Geoengineered by how?
Yeah.
Pentagon, DARPA, disgusting.
So the way he came to thyroid and the heart was what Rhoda Barn discovered. He practiced medicine for 50 years. And in his patients, the rate of heart attacks was 1/20th the rate of the normal population. So he would have expected, so he did a study of some 1,600 people, about 1,500 something. And there were only 4 deaths from heart attacks in those patients, whereas in the general representative population, there would have been 72 deaths. No change in diet, no advice on smoking, drinking, exercise, nothing. This was a cohort that had thyroid medication. This was a cohort that was not on thyroid medication. And the first time he thought about this was there was a 59-year-old male. He'd had 2 heart attacks. A friend of his, he put him on thyroid meds. No further heart attacks stopped. And then after several years, he got tired of taking the thyroid meds. He stopped taking the thyroid meds, and within 4 months of stopping the medication, he had a heart attack and died.
Why doesn't the body re-correct itself though once you supplement it, and because the body is supposed to self-heal?
Not in the cases where you're giving a thyroid hormone. Now, if the thyroid wasn't working before, it's completely stopped because the body is going to get exogenous thyroid hormone. And so if you want to reestablish your thyroid, you got to do it very slowly and make sure that your thyroid actually exists.
Starts to
Yeah.
do it itself again.
Yeah. And typically, people who would get administered thyroid meds, thyroid hormone, are people who either don't have a thyroid or have a malfunctioning thyroid, which is why they were administered it. But that's not something you can take off. If they were hypo, they are hypo for various reasons of exogenous toxins or various other conditions. Maybe they didn't have iodine growing up and they have a stunted thyroid or whatever it is.
Because recently I've been reading that all those toxins that we're talking about that are causing all these problems are stuck in our bodies because they're in the fat cells. The
Yes.
fat cells are holding on to it, even if you're
You're
really,
really
really thin,
yes.
it's holding on to it. And
Yes.
every time you try to correct something that's wrong with an organ, you may get there. And we shouldn't be taking pills forever.
No.
But it doesn't heal itself because these fat cells are
Continue
still
to
toxic
exude,
and
yeah.
the body is still flowing toxins throughout.
So how do you eliminate it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a
That's
very
what
hard question.
Yeah, well, the only thing I'm finding in all the research is something about niacin, D3,
Will help to flush it.
causing
Yeah.
the fat cells to do something, this word that you probably know, but I don't know it, called exploding in layman's terms, to get the toxins out or something.
The iodine itself will cause toxins to come out of your body.
Absolutely, yeah.
So he didn't do any of that. Rhoda Barnes stuck to thyroid hormone and nothing but. So what this is an assessment of thyroid hormone treatment on heart disease.
And he used pig and bovine?
Pig, mainly pig, because the pig is the most similar to man. And so then he said, holy cow, this guy was on thyroid, didn't die, and now he's off of thyroid and he died. Let me look at my patients. So he started a study with 1,569 patients, 20 years and under, with him on thyroid treatment. In all, there were 4 attacks, heart attacks, in men, and these were from men who had had previous heart attacks. And for that same cohort, the Framingham study had 72. So he had a 1/20th better rate of heart attack risk than the Framingham, which was the state of the nation at the time. And they did not get any counsel on food at all. The myxedemic heart, so you remember the Ansel Keys studies and the old Russian guy studies about rabbits being fed cholesterol? Anyone remember that? Rabbits were fed cholesterol, rabbits are vegetarian, they developed atherosclerosis, and they applied that same logic to humans and said, if humans eat cholesterol, it's going to clog your arteries. Well, guess what they did some more of? They fed these rabbits thyroid along with the cholesterol, and rabbits did not develop atherosclerosis. It was protected in atherosclerosis. This is a Russian researcher. In the Bronx Hospital, they started studies with lambs with thyroid. They created thyroid deficiency, and they found atherosclerosis in lambs. There's a guy by the name of Dr. T. Leary, a Boston medical examiner, who looked at 9 deaths from heart attacks, and what he saw was there was cholesterol in the arteries, but it was post what he called mucoid degeneration. So there was mucin in the heart and in the vessels, and the cholesterol actually had come there to protect. It was as a protective mechanism. There's a William Kuhn study from Washington University School of Medicine, St. Louis, which looked at thyroid function and blood vessel degeneration. So low thyroid function will cause blood vessel degeneration.
So what exactly is atherosclerosis?
Degeneration of your arteries, your heart vessels. Hardening, calcification.
So if people who had heart problems started taking
thyroid, they didn't die of heart attacks.
And they also reversed
it, yes.
And not need these surgeries are like past the button now.
Oh yeah,
so common.
Yeah, and they don't save lives. Yeah,
They don't save lives.
they don't increase. They increase mortality actually.
But they increase mortality for a lot of reasons other than the heart. It has to do with going into the hospital for open surgery.
All of that.
You know,
Every
happens to you in the hospital.
Machine, your
Yeah.
Then you get pump brain afterwards.
Yeah.
So this guy did this study where he looked at 3 groups of 288 patients total. One group was businessmen, 50. So remember their ages: 55, 61, 67. Middle-aged, older. The businessmen were about 55 years old. Then the infirmary patients were average age of 61 years. And then there were hospital patients who were much worse condition, about 67 years. All had high cholesterol, which is a typical symptom of low thyroid. And they had low metabolic rates. So they all had, in his view, hypothyroidism. So some of them had less damage because they were younger. Some of them had more damage because they were older. Over 5 years, some of these patients, there was a kind of a blinded study, some of these patients received thyroid, and some of these patients did not receive thyroid. They were all heart patients that either had a heart attack or a stroke at one point or another, and let's see what happened to them.
There wasn't a placebo done, was it? They just,
Yes, so some of them got thyroid and some of them did not, and nobody knew which ones. Then they opened the code and looked at the results. Sorry, that's a repeat. The businessmen, the people who were administered thyroid from the businessmen group, which is the 55-year-olds, had no heart attacks or strokes. post-thyroid medication. The second group, which was I think the 61-year-olds, 15% of those not on thyroid died from heart attacks.
That's the first group.
Excuse me.
No,
This is the second one.
Well, the second one's under there.
15% of those not. Oh yes, sorry. You're right.
Oh,
She's absolutely right. The businessmen on thyroid had no heart attacks or strokes, and 15% of the businessmen not on thyroid died of heart attacks or strokes. In the second group, which was the 61-year-olds, the death in the thyroid group was 3%. The death in the non-thyroid group was 19%. 6 times more. That's very, very significant. Third group, which is the 67-year-old hospital-admitted patients who were pretty damn sick, the deaths in the thyroid, the non-thyroid group were 2 times almost, 44% more than the non-thyroid group. So it's powerful medicine. It's powerful medicine that saves lives.
And he didn't use iodine?
No, you just use thyroid medication.
And which is better, do you think?
They didn't quite have the iodine back
But
then.
now that we have the
If,
labels,
iodine is, of course, the best therapy
Over
if you
the
catch it
bromide.
early. But if your thyroid is
Depleted.
gone, depleted, or gone, or
Right.
not functioning,
course,
then
yeah.
of course. 1954, investigators at the University of California, at a
Oh
university,
wait, you're having Orly take Lugol's though. So
Yes.
she doesn't have thyroid.
but iodine will replete her body with iodine, and to the extent,
That she doesn't have to take thyroid medicine anymore.
or it will supplement the thyroid medicine.
Okay.
How does one know if someone's thyroid is so depleted it's too
Yeah,
late?
that's
Uh,
And they haven't had it.
Iodine won't work.
Sorry?
Iodine won't work if you don't have a hormone, thyroid gland, or it's very
It's depleted.
yeah,
How do you find
degenerated.
out if it's depleted?
It won't work. You
Thyroid
have
medication.
hypothyroid symptoms.
Well, you know by those tests, right?
Yeah. Those
that is-
tests and the symptoms.
Like
So
the
you
test
take
she
the
took.
But if you take the test, you're already taking a thyroid medication. So
Well,
it's,
but which test did you, like she had a complete thing,
yeah,
and
Yeah.
the prescription I have is for complete. Otherwise, if I just go to a regular doctor, they just do TSH, T12, T4, they do a few things.
They just do
and you
TSH
don't know. They say,
typically,
"Oh,
yeah.
it's fine."
so even taking thyroid now, if I had the full panel done, you can tell whether it's depleted or not.
You can to a degree, and you can take your clinical test. You can do a clinical examination, look at your basal body temperature and other symptoms. So, cholesterol and heart attacks. They took patients in mental institutions who had no thyroid deficiency. Okay, so these were patients who did not have low basal metabolic rate. So this was what was used to justify not using thyroid as a treatment for heart disease. So what they did was they took these people who had high cholesterol levels, but not due to low thyroid. They had heart attacks. They were patients in mental institutions, and they had no thyroid deficiency. And they gave them 5 grains of thyroid. 5 grains is, 1 grain is about 60 micro, 65 to 30, so about 300 micrograms of thyroid to someone with a broken heart is going to kill them. So these were starting doses. You never want to start with a dose of, it's like giving someone digitalis. A little bit of digitalis cures heart disease. A lot of digitalis kills you from the same heart disease. So these are intolerable doses, and they had cholesterol, high cholesterol, and coronary disease. They had some other disease, and they could not tolerate the starting doses of 5 grains, which is about 300 micrograms. Heart gets stressed because what's the thyroid hormone going to do? It's going to pump up your body. It's going to increase your basal metabolic rate. And these patients, a lot of them died. And so they said the thyroid medication does not work for heart disease and you must never administer it. But remember the number 5 grains. We're talking 300 micrograms. And for heart disease, we're talking about giving patients 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, 20 micrograms in increasing doses as their heart adapts and gets used to it and gets stronger and the rest of the body gets better, the myxedema declines. So there's a vast difference between giving someone a fatal dose of thyroid and giving someone a therapeutic dose of thyroid. There's another study that was, and so a lot of people died from this too. So that made it very dangerous because dextro, when we had thyroxine, which was the left hand or the right-handed thyroid, which worked at 1/20th of the potency of the levo, when people went from the dexo to levo at the same dose, they were getting 20 times more thyroid. Of course, you're going to die if you get 20 times more thyroid. And 6 milligrams of dexo is 4.5 grains of desiccated thyroid. So when you look at the potency, when you look at the conversion, if you're giving massive doses, a person whose heart is compromised is definitely going to die from it. But that's not the point. The point is to give the heart the right amount of thyroid that it needs to function, but not more. Dr. M. Israel, I think it was in New York, a New York doctor, found thyroid therapy, a cardiologist, to be very effective in dealing with and treating heart disease, way more effective than statins, the beta blockers, any of the heart drugs. Dr. James C. Wren ran a 5-year study of 347 patients whose mean age was about 64 years. Only 9% of the patients were hypothyroid based upon their lab work. But all the others were hypothyroid based upon their symptoms. They had low basal metabolic rate, their temperatures were low, they had mixed edema, so on, their cholesterol levels were high. They were all treated with thyroid hormone. Their mean cholesterol levels dropped 22% because thyroid hormone regulates cholesterol mechanism. They had substantial improvements in their clinical symptoms. And the death rate for this population, expected death rate was 44%. Instead, the death rate was only 11%.
When was this?
This was in the late 1900s. I'll put a
Like as in
80s, I think.
the 80s?
Yeah, somewhere around that. But so the death rate was 4 times higher, would have been 4 times higher without the thyroid meds for these people.
Well, it's just
That's
fascinating
300%.
that this, you know, the statins are so commonly prescribed to people who have high cholesterol.
Yes,
And
exactly.
statins,
So you're barking entirely up the wrong tree.
they're just barking entirely up the wrong tree.
So here's the protocol, practical tips. This is the Broda Barn protocol. After, if you had a heart attack or a stroke or any heart event, you rest for 60 days first. You treat your body to complete bed rest. Then you start slow. He started with, you'd start with a quarter grain or less. A quarter grain is about 15 micrograms of T4, the equivalent of. He would start with a combined hormone, which was T4, T3, T2, T1 calcitonin. And start slow, increase by a quarter grain or even less each month. And so you're gradually ramping up the performance or the function of the heart. Check temperatures. When the temperature reaches 97.8, you stop. So now, presumably, your heart function is in tandem with what your body's metabolic rate is. And no more than 2 grains. 2 grains is 120 micrograms. 2 grains is 120 micrograms. This is enough to stop heart attacks in their track. And he had excellent survival rate. As you can see from his patients, they had 1/20th the heart disease of the normal population. And he didn't give them advice on food, smoking, drinking, exercise, nothing. This was a pure thyroid hormone study. It treated their blood pressure, mixed edema. It's better than BP meds. It treated their fatigue. So it was, in a sense, it's a miracle medicine that's been forgotten as a treatment for heart disease. And my thing...
No, I mean...